Today I'm fixing a buddy's brake. So you can see the levers are coming right through. It basically needs to be bled, but I don't have to do a full bleed. He stores this in a really hot room. I think it's an attic, to be honest with you, and this is a bike that doesn't get ridden much. So the heat does something where it dries the seal, it sucks in air, and so today I'm going to open up the cap here. I'm going to press the pistons and the caliper down below. I'll show you that. And I'll press those in. And that'll push the air back into here. And then I will get fluid, top the fluid off in here. And we should have a nice stiff caliper. The first thing we need to do is bring the bleed screw up to the most level area. And you do that by spinning the brake clamp. I can also rotate the stand. Any way that it works for you will do. But I'm just going to loosen the brake clamp and just rotate it up. And yeah, so the bleed screw, that way the air comes up here and the air bubbles come to the highest point. I'm going to take the bleed cap off, or the reservoir cap plug screw. And then I'll have to adjust the camera when we get down to the bottom. That sucker is on there. I think I'm going to have to get a sharper Allen head. And we can do that. All right, I got my T-wrench. There we go. Now, I happen to have a Shimano bleeding cup that goes here, but you don't necessarily need it to do this if you were to tie a rag around to get any of the drip off. But I am fortunate enough to have the Shimano bleed clip, and this just screws in like this. And you just make sure that the O-ring is sitting tight. And it's plastic, so you can strip it out. I've already stripped it out. This little device here is a plug that lets the little bit of fluid that's in there. And I am going to pour a little more of that fluid in there. I'll keep the plug in for now. And I have some Shimano, Shimano hydraulic mineral oil. And you can use the Magura blood oil. Because it's mineral oil, you can get away with lots of light oils, but you use the bicycle specific stuff, they're not going to create much issues. It's probably not even going to use all that oil. But now I'll readjust the camera. I'll take the front wheel off. And for now, I'm going to bring this up just so I can work on it easier. And we'll adjust the camera. That'll do once I get the wheel out. So now I'm going to get a thick screwdriver, thin screwdriver, thin plastic tire lever. Lots of different things work, but I happen to have this, and I'm going to press these pads back into the bodies. And you don't want to put a ton of force because you don't want to mar the pads since we're reusing them. So I'm giving it a little bit twisting action. Now we'll come back up to the brake lever. Okay, I have the pistons down there pushed into the bodies. I am going to pull the center thing out, and that's just going to let the oil drip in. The brake lever itself is going to be very loose because I am going to, you don't want to pump the brake lever without a rotor in it, but I happen to have a spare rotor, or you could put the wheel back in, or one of the plastic blocks in there. I'm just going to hold this in place down here. Yeah, and then when I squeeze this, all the air bubbles that were in there got pushed into here when I open up the pads in the caliper. And as you can see, the lever itself is nice and tight. And I could pull that out, put the wheel back in. I will put this plug back in. That way when I unscrew this, the oil doesn't go everywhere. Yeah, this little device is fantastic. It just makes a clean job for bleeding. And it works really good with the Shimano stuff. It doesn't fit into all the other brake systems. I wish it did. It works that good. We'll put the cap back on. Make sure the rubber O-ring is still there. And this was on pretty tight. These things just really need to sit on top and then just give it a slight thing. You don't really need to lock them down. I'm sure there's a torque spec. I don't know what it is. It's probably really light, like 1 Newton meter or something. I'll put the caliper back to its semi-neutral position. Once I sit on the bike, I'll be able to adjust it. I'll move this back out of my way. Boom. I usually like to have the quick release back here, but with this type of skewer, you're limited, because if I come around, I can't cam it. some of the Fox shocks, you can adjust that out on this side. This is a rot shock. Nope, that's where it goes if you want some decent clamping force. And boom, nice and tight up here. Good to go. Now I can get it on the ground, adjust the levers, and done. A lot of times people think that they need a full bleed new pads when stuff like that happens, and a lot of times, like I said, he stores it in a spot that's really hot, and this bike doesn't get used often. This has happened to his bike a few times since I started working on his bikes, and I'm convinced that the mineral oil doesn't like the prolonged heat, and it either dries out the seal, and there's suction inside the system. When the pads come in against the rotor, it's the suction in the system that brings it back. So I think the seals might dry up a little bit, and then it burps air into the system. And it's the only thing that I can think of, because you could see when I put the Shimano cup with the fluid to bring it back in, it didn't take much fluid out of it at all. I just used that more as a topping off feature. That's all. So now I just need to put the brake levers back into the proper position, because it was a thing that I did with both the front and the rear. Great thing with dropper posts is when you're working on them, just drop that post. Me and him ride together, so I've been setting up his brakes for a while. I know exactly where he likes them. Oh, feels good. Get the front brake, or if you're watching over in Europe, this would not be the front brake. This would be the rear. I did try once setting my brakes up like that. It was a little odd, but doable. I ended up switching them back to right-hand rear. Boom. Lots of meat on these things now. Before, they were all the way into the grip. And sometimes when the pads are so worn, the brakes will get loose, but they don't necessarily need to be bled. That wasn't the case here. There's plenty of meat on these pads, and yeah, I think it was a heat related issue. There you go. That's how I go about filling a reservoir on here, or refilling a reservoir. I didn't have to break the bleed valve on the caliper. I just needed to push the pistons back in to push whatever air that was in the system back into here. And I was pretty fortunate, because wherever the air bubbles were, they were on top. So either the air came in through here in the heat, because if it came in down there, if it came in at the calipers, the brakes wouldn't feel this tight. I'd still have to force, I'd have to actually push fluid from the caliper all the way in. I didn't have to do that. So we got lucky. But this is a fairly common thing. And it's a trick that I learned that happens to work very well. Hopefully that helps someone out there. And if you like what you see, hit like, subscribe. And the bike is a Santa Cruz 5010, probably 4 years old. It's a sweet rig. All right, till the next time.